And we are live. We're here on Beyond the Woodline. I'm Joe the host, and my usual co-host, Shannon Rogers. She had to work tonight, so she's not going to be here. But that's okay. We don't need her anyway. But my guest tonight's Anson Hammond. How you doing, Anson?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. That is how you pronounce your name. I meant to ask you that. It is Anson, right?
Yep, it's Anson. Yep.
Yeah. I just want to make sure it wasn't a foreign name where I had to add some kind of accent to anything. But okay,
Oh
good.
no, nope. You said it perfectly.
Okay, cool, man. So, yeah, man, we were talking offline, on the phone earlier, and even a while ago, I was saying because I always like to start off talking about my stuff first, and then
Hmm.
yeah, just to kind of let people know that we got some pretty good vocals Saturday, uh, and we were talking about that, and we also heard like it was big, whatever it was in the woods. It sounded like it was getting dragged. And it sounded, I was expecting something to burst out from the tree line. It was that close. It was maybe, I don't know, 40 yards from us. And it was
Hmm.
just and then it stopped. It only lasted for a couple of seconds. And we were just like, okay, because it was right there, And maybe about 2 or 3 minutes later, that's when the screaming started and the howls. I don't know how to classify it. It's a scream or a howl, but it's so loud and so long. Uh,
I I've had a lot of experiences like that. Like I said, I've grown up in Colorado my whole life and have big game hunted and fished and stuff since I was a little kid. And there's something out in the woods. I mean, I've seen things and heard things that I can't explain. That is no animal that I know of in the woods out here.
right.
And it's always really cool to hear that type of stuff out there in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of sightings in Colorado. And as a matter of fact, one of my good friends that lives, it's called the Hill Country here in Texas,
Hmm.
and it's near Canyon Lake. And he actually lives near Canyon Lake. He had a sighting in Canyon Lake, and he had a sighting in Colorado. And oh yeah, the one in Colorado, I can't remember where he told me it was at, but the one in Colorado is the one that scared him the most. He actually peed himself.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I've heard some stuff out there in the woods, especially at night when you're out there camping and stuff out there. You're 3 hours away from anywhere remotely close to a vehicle or anything like that. I mean, we used to hike in or ride horses in, and
oh
the
yeah,
horses would start stirring up in the middle of the night, and you start hearing stuff out there, and you're like, "That's not a bear or an elk or a deer. That's not cattle. I don't know what that is," and it can be pretty eerie.
yeah. And that's what I tell people. The woods are creepy and eerie, just as they are.
Yep.
And so yeah, and I'm gonna send you a picture too after we get off. We came upon a little uh, a burial plot out there. Yeah, and who I don't I couldn't see a date on it. Maybe you could.
Hmm.
Like I said, I'll send it to you. And it
Yeah.
was two headstones. It was very small. It was maybe I don't know 6 feet long.
Hmm.
You know, a few feet wide. But there was a headstone on one side and a headstone on another, and they were both small little headstones. And they had little toys like baby toys. Like there was a
Really.
baseball. Yeah, there was a baseball. There was a little stuffed animal. There was even a water gun. And there were like some American flags and a Texans flag. And they all looked kind of new. Well, and you could tell someone had been keeping up with it because you could actually see the rake marks like on the ground where someone
Hmm.
had it was taking care of it. So someone's taking care of this still plot. Yeah.
Is this kind of off the beaten path a little bit, or is it pretty close
No,
to a road?
yeah, just right on the side of the road, but it's deep in the forest.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like I say deep, maybe 3 miles, which is a pretty good little drive when you're driving. You can't haul ass down these roads.
Hmm.
Yeah, man, and I saw that, and we pulled over and we took some pictures. We even did an EVP session there because the
Nice.
guy that I went,
Nice.
uh, my friend that I went with, he actually had a Bigfoot sighting, but he's a paranormal guy,
Hmm.
and his team went out there and they got more than they could handle that one night, and so ever since then we've been really good friends, and we go out all the time. Yeah, man. So this Saturday was pretty good. We actually even heard some breathing. It was like
Was that caught on EVP or was that caught? You could hear it where
no,
you were.
we heard it audibly,
Really?
and yeah, and this was I bet every bit of 300 feet away, and before anyone said, "Well, how could you hear it from that far?" So he was like, "I'm gonna go check it out. I'm gonna go check it out." I said, "Okay, hold on." So he walks over there, and he gets to the edge of the wood line, and I'm putting my shoes on, and I go over there, and we meet up, and then we come back because we didn't see anything or hear anything. Well, we heard something moving around back in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
and he wanted to go put on his actual because we were both in shorts and stuff. And he said, "I'm gonna go put my pants on and my hiking boots." I said, "Okay." So we come back to the camp, and he had a friend there with him, and he grabs his pistol and his boots and his hiking pants, and we go back to the woods. And we go into the woods this time, and he's back here going, "Hey, who's back here?" You know, he's not like yelling it. He's saying it kind of loud,
Mm-hmm.
but he's not yelling it. And he's walking back, and I'm watching his back, and because that's one thing I do when I go hiking for the most part, especially when we're out doing that stuff. That stuff, I let I like to have like a bunch of space in between people in case
Yeah.
something happens. You know,
Yep.
I like to keep them within eyesight, but you know, kind of watch each other's back a little bit better
Oh
that
yeah.
way. And so I'm maybe I don't know 30, 40 feet behind him, and we're just back there in the woods looking. And when we come back, his friend was there. She goes, I can hear you guys back there. So the sound does travel because I was like, man, I know we're hearing this. As far away as it was, I was like, I know we're hearing this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool little. We didn't think to record it. We're just kind of tripping out, and we're just listening to it. You can hear it sounded like a wheezy. It was weird.
That's interesting. We have a place up here. It was just my wife and I. Like I said, my wife is the assistant director for Anubis Paranormal Research Organization, the paranormal team that I'm with, and we go out by ourselves quite a bit. And we went to Glenwood Springs, and that's up on top of the hill up there. They have a memorial to Doc Holliday.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it's a marker. It says on the marker that he's not buried there. He's buried somewhere in that cemetery, and it's an extremely old cemetery up on top of the hill. And we did just a real quick little investigation up there when we were up there with my kids. We went there on vacation for a couple of days, and one of the EVPs that we caught was some labored breathing that you could hear on the audio equipment, and it was really interesting because Doc Holliday died of tuberculosis, and so it was really interesting to hear labored breathing right in the area that Doc Holliday is supposedly buried in.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I like to hear something like that or see something.
That's one thing that's really cool about paranormal, or I mean, any type of paranormal investigations, whether you're doing UFOs, cryptids, hauntings, anything like that, is not necessarily what you're catching, but the history behind it.
Yeah,
And gathering that history behind the locations that you're in is always really fun. And we have a great historian that works with us. She's actually our medium also. She works as our historian, and she's always finding stuff. She's always finding something that we didn't know about an area that we're in, or always comes up with some new things, which is really awesome.
cool. Yeah. Shannon, my co-host, who's on here with me. She's a psychic medium, and
Okay.
so yeah, so she's pretty cool, man. So I like having her balance out the show with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's so
Yep.
when you have different people kind of helping you out.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how long have you been into the paranormal field? What got you involved with
The paranormal field is, when I was younger, I had experiences, just strange things that you can't explain. Didn't really think much about them, and I honestly wasn't into the paranormal for a lot of years. What actually kind of got me really interested in it was I worked in the oil field for 8 years here in Colorado, and I was in between getting laid off, and I went and picked up a job working for a security company. And I was the night patrolman. We would patrol buildings in different areas at night. And I always had weird experiences. There was always something. There was a few buildings that we had that we did that there was always something weird happening in them. And me being a very diehard skeptic, I'm still skeptical now. If any evidence ever comes through, I critique it to the nth degree all the time. And I'd always try to pass it off as, well, it was this or that. But there was always a few things in there that I couldn't explain. When I met my wife, she was the one that was a very firm believer in the paranormal, and it always drove her nuts because I was always trying to, debunk any and everything that I saw, and she would always give me a hard time about it. But I think once I started seeing things I couldn't explain is when I really got into it. And it was a couple years after that is when me and her actually started investigating by ourselves. And we investigated for probably, I would say probably 2 years before we actually joined APRO. Okay. And that's how I got started in the paranormal. She's always been a good, firm believer in it. Me, I've always kind of just been a skeptic. I definitely believe in the paranormal. I believe that there is something out there, but with the way modern technology is and the way the world is now, and everybody wants to be, the new haunted television show or the new craze. There's so much evidence out there now that is easily debunked or it's faked, and that's a sad truth in the paranormal. So I always have that skeptic's mind when I go into it, and so I've always kind of kept that with me, even becoming more of a believer now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. You've got to really examine the evidence. I know I talk about a lot of experiences that I have out in the forest, but I've been out there hundreds of times, and really my experience is only a handful of them, So it's like, I don't know about the paranormal, but I know there are people who every time they go out, step into their backyard, they have a Bigfoot experience,
Exactly.
And you can't do that. I don't think you can.
Well, like we were talking about earlier before we started the podcast, in the topic of demonology, I've studied demonology for quite a while now, and that's the new thing you see in the media, you see on television now, is that every weird experience now is automatically a demon. It's a dark entity in my home, or it's a dark entity, following me around, which I can tell with great certainty that most people that are dealing with something, it's not a demonic entity that you're dealing with. But that's the trend. That's the trend that you see in pop culture now. It's a trend you see on television, is that everything is a dark haunting. And very few of those actually exist.
Yeah. Well, that stuff sells, so they're going to push it.
It does.
And one thing I've learned too is that not everything that's dark is necessarily evil.
Yes.
Not everything that's light or white is necessarily good. So,
yes.
I think people get lump everything dark into one category and everything light into another category. They do. And that's not necessarily true.
On that topic, we did my wife and I went out on an investigation just a few weeks ago, and talking of things that could be considered dark or evil. We had an experience out. We have a cemetery here in Grand Junction, and it's a highly, highly active area. We've gone out there numerous times. We've taken the team out there. We've done trainings out there. Very, very active location. We were out there, her and I. We have an area over there that she never has a good feeling in this area. And we went out there, and she had her hair pulled up in a really tight bun when we were out there. And I heard her jump, and she had gotten her hair pulled out there. And she said that it felt like hands going through the back of her hair and grab it and pull it. Well, when I looked at the back of her head, her hair's all pulled up real nice and neat in a bun. And there was a good strand of hair pulled out of the bun completely. And we're away. There's no trees where we're at. There's nothing that can get snagged out there. We're out in the middle of an open area on this road, on this dirt patch in the cemetery. But it just goes to show you, do I think it was demonic? No, I don't. Is it a human spirit that might not be the greatest fan of women? Probably so. Is it just a spirit that wants to be left alone? Very well could be. But is it a demonic spirit? No, it's not. There's one thing that I've learned in all my studies and everything that I've done with demonology, is that ghost haunt properties, ghost haunt land, ghost haunt homes. Demonic spirits haunt people. So the chances of you having a demonic entity inside of a cemetery is there's a very slim chance that that's going to be the case.
And when you get back to your pulling your wife's hair, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was had bad intentions too. I'm not saying
Yeah,
it wasn't.
exactly.
It may just been played for. Hey, I'm here. Pay
Mm-hmm.
attention. You know, um, and then also, Shannon always says if the person was an asshole in real life, they may be an asshole in the afterlife.
I very much agree with that. I very much agree with that. And that's kind of the thing that you run into when you go into areas like that, where you go into, going into cemeteries or even homes or properties that are notorious for hauntings. Is you don't know what you're going to come across. I'm very much a believer in transient spirits. If there's an opening, if there's a portal in that area, or there's a hub of paranormal activity in this area, it doesn't mean that the spirits that reside there aren't visited by other entities that are transient spirits. And you can run in. It's a gamble going into those areas because you don't know what you're going to run into. Are you going to run into a malicious spirit like that? Is it a spirit that's more curious? Is it more interested in just what you're doing? Or like you said, is it a spirit that's just trying to get your attention? But you don't know. You don't know what you're going into. And I think that's kind of why I like doing those bigger areas like that, is because you really don't know what you're getting into. It's kind of that Pandora's box. Once you open it up, you don't know what you're going to get until you open it up.
Yeah. In the house that I used to live in many years ago, we had a lot of paranormal activity in that house. My kids would experience stuff, and other people for that matter. I'm just not going to mention any names. One night I was asleep, and it was like maybe 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and I saw this black figure standing right next to my bed, and it moved towards me. It was only a few feet away from me. When it moved towards me, man, I threw a kick, and I said, "Yeah, it's back," MF, and my dog was ready in the room because when I threw that kick and when my foot came down, I actually hit my dog. He was a boxer, and he knew not to come into that room. I I could be in bed and call him, "Come here, Atlas, come here, Atlas." He wouldn't come because he knew not to come to the bedroom, and he wasn't allowed in bed. So for him to be in that room already, he had to have known something was there.
He knew something was off. Yep.
Yeah, but he never barked, he never made a noise, and the more and more I look at it and think about it, it wasn't evil. It just moved towards me. And it was me that got scared.
Yeah.
You wake up, you see somebody standing there. Yeah. So I think, and it was dark. It was a black figure because there was a window right behind it, and even though the windows is nighttime, you can still see the ambient light coming in. And yeah, it was. It scared the hell out of me. But the more and more I think about it, it's like I don't think he wanted to do anything to me or hurt me or you know.
Well, and there's Chris, our executive director with Anubis Paranormal. He, he has a lot of different methodologies that we use, and a lot of this. Most of the stuff that he has is very well grounded in his research and research of others. And spirits, a lot of times, they don't. If they're trying to communicate with you, they're trying to do what they can, and being that they have limited resources to communicate. Those experiences that they're doing that are trying to communicate with you that are perfectly harmless to them are very scary to the living. And that's one thing that with residential hauntings, when we handle residential hauntings, if it's a spirit that is a human spirit that is not causing any harm to anybody, isn't trying to hurt or be a malevolent spirit in a home, that is one thing that you do try with individuals, is try to learn how to cohabitate with the spirit. Because you can cohabitate with a human spirit inside of your home, and that's if you're willing to do it. Some people I don't want it in my home, I want it out. And there's processes with that too. But you can cohabitate with spirits in your home effectively. You just have to know that sometimes the way that they communicate with you isn't going to be the way that you might not want it, and it might not be at the time frame that you want it either.
Sure. Yeah. And that's kind of the way we felt about this. We think it was the previous owners, and they were actually the only owners of this house ever, and they bought it like right after like World War II.
Okay.
They died in their 90s, and they're in like the mid 90s. They had a long life, and they were the only ones in this house. And at one morning, I was sitting at the bed. I was like, I gotta get up and go to work, and this, someone jabbed me in the ribs, just good solid jab, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I was like, what the hell, I was the only one in the room.
Well, and there is that philosophy too, that thought process that when you pass on, there's times that spirit might not know they're dead,
Right.
And so when if you lived in a house for 50 years, 60 years, and pass away in that home and not know that you've passed on, and then all of a sudden somebody else is living in your home, that's going to be a shock to you.
You know what?
You know,
I've heard people say that, but this is the first time that actually makes sense, because that house was empty for like 5 years,
mm-hmm.
and then we just moved in.
Mm-hmm.
So they might have free room with this house for 5 years, not knowing whether or not they were there or not.
Mm-hmm. And spirits, I mean, spirits, just like humans, can get possessive of their property, and that's one thing that you do see with with human spirits, especially in homes like that are old homes. I mean, this is a World War II era home.
Yeah.
Is that they do get possessive of their property. It's still in their mind, it's their property still, and you're the visitor, you're the intruder, not them. And so that's one thing that you kind of have to learn with that cohabitation with the spirit, is that at one point this was their home.
Right. Yeah. And with that being said, we were actually doing some remodeling on that house. We're doing part of the hallway and then the master bedroom. I mean, bathroom. And my cousins were actually doing it. And the night before they came in, they were like, "Okay, tomorrow we're gonna start doing demo." They were talking about, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk about the process. And my cousin's standing there, and I see him looking down at his arm, and he's holding his arm, and he looks across at my other cousin, who's like 6 feet away from him. And he's looking at my cousin. He starts talking again, and he looks down at his arm, and looks at my cousin. He goes, "Man, what are you doing to me?" He's like, my other cousin's like, "I'm over here. I'm not even touching you."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Dude," he goes, "someone's grabbing my arm." He goes, "No one's grabbing your arm, And right away, me and my family started looking at each other. We're like, "Okay, something's going on," with my cousin, And so he kind of backs up into a corner where he can see everyone, And he's talking, and he looks down at his arm again, and he looks at me. He goes, "Joe," he goes, "someone's grabbing my damn arm." And he came over there. He walked across the kitchen. He grabbed my arm and he squeezed my arm. He goes, "This is how hard they're squeezing," And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." So then I was like, "Okay, this is what's going on in this house." And I told him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the next morning when he came in to start work, he goes, "Hey, come here. I want to show you something." So I look at my arm, and on his arm was 4 finger bruises on his arm.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess they didn't want him working on the house.
Yeah. And that happens. I mean, there is a difference between, there's a few different spirit categories that we look at, and one of them being a residual haunting and the other one being an intelligent. Obviously that one's an intelligent haunting. It knows what it's doing. Residual haunting being a spirit it's basically just it's a recording in time is all it is.
Right.
And a lot of times you'll see that with remodels. You'll see a residual spirit, like if you take out a door in your home and take out a stairway and move the stairway, you'll have cases of people seeing apparitions come through the wall and float up into the second level of the home.
Yeah.
Well, there was a stairway there at one point, and there was a door there. It's just a recording in time. They don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And that recording, they're not going to interact with you. You can't interact with them. And it's just all it is just that recording in time. They're just doing the same thing that they did in life.
Right.
But having that, I mean, that's obviously very much an intelligent haunting. It knew what it was doing, and it was trying to get his attention.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty cool. So I don't remember if you answered this question, but does your wife have abilities?
She hasn't actually came out and said that she has, but I believe that just working with her for as long as I have and seeing how she acts during investigations, I do believe, I don't think that she has, I wouldn't say that she's a medium by any means, but I think she's definitely a sensitive.
Okay.
She picks up on things very, very quickly. She can pick up on the atmosphere very, very quickly, and she'll be the first one to tell you that if she doesn't feel comfortable in an area or not. And normally there's a reason, because I've trusted that instinct with her quite a bit. She'll have a bad feeling about an area that we're in, and we'll start getting activity almost instantly. And or she'll have a feeling that something's around us. And so I definitely believe that she is a sensitive.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, so demonology. What possessed you to say this is what I want to do?
So demonology was something that I got into before I started with APRO. Um, when I started looking into it, I actually had a presence in my home that I used to live in. Um, I was going through a lot of real negative things at that time. I was going through a divorce, and I had a bunch of different things going on. And at that time, didn't really think much of it. But I started noticing things inside my home. I started noticing different smells. Started noticing knocking, footsteps, different things going on. And I'm like, it's an old house. This house was built in 1900 that we lived in. And the first time I saw any type of presence in my home was in my living room. I was laying on my couch. I worked night shift and came home. I was laying on my couch watching television, and we had this little tiny window in our living room right by the television off the left-hand side of our television. And I was looking, something had attracted me to that area, and I looked and I saw, just darkness because the lights were off. I turned back, started watching TV, and I kind of froze. And I looked back, and the darkness that I was seeing was darker than the darkness of the room. And it was so dark to where you couldn't physically see through the window. Whatever was there, you couldn't see through the window.
Hmm.
And that was the first time I saw it. The second time was I started seeing real quick flashes out of the corner of my eyes. And then as time went on, it got slower and slower, where it was more, it wanted me to see what was there. It was real slow out of the corner of my eye walking around. And I would see it, in different areas. I would go out and shoot in the desert, and you would see it. And then it got to the point where the home started feeling darker. Just even in the middle of the day, I had friends that would come over, and they would get uncomfortable and not want to stay in the home. And then that's from there, it turned into more physical. I would hear screams, like something screaming in my ear in the middle of the night. It would wake me up from a dead sleep. I would hear growls in my ears. And then one night I was laying on the couch and I fell asleep on there, and I woke up to something. It felt like something was sitting on my chest. And at first, the first reaction is it's a medical issue. Something's going on. Well, then when I started actually calming down and thinking about it, I looked at the couch and I was actually sunk into the couch farther than I would if I was just laying on it. And so something was actually physically pushing me down. And so that's when I started actually researching demonology and started researching ways of getting rid of this entity. It wasn't definitely not a possession stage, but it's definitely in an infestation stage. And that doorway, I think, was open just due to stress and having those doorways open. And it was a good 2.5 years before that entity, before I actually got rid of that particular entity. And I ended up coincidentally moving from the home. But up until that point, zero paranormal activity in that home. No activity whatsoever, and up until that point in time. And that's when I started getting into it, because when I started looking into it, I mean, obviously we have the internet, we have different things now, but you can't trust everything that's on the internet. Right. And there was no legitimate paranormal teams in Grand Junction at the time that I could actually talk to about it. And so when I started looking into it, and I actually started talking to Chris about it when I joined APRO about getting into demonology, it was more along the lines of trying to help people that don't have anywhere else to turn. And because at that moment, when you have something like that going on inside your home, it's something that you can't comprehend a lot of times. You don't understand why it's happening or what to do about it. And I wanted to help those people that don't know where to turn and be able to help get rid of that, because I mean, it is a scary thing, and it's something that you don't know what to do. It's different than a normal haunting. And once you've actually experienced one and actually have been through that circumstance, it's very much different than a normal haunting. You can feel it. It's a heaviness that you can feel that doesn't go away. And being able to have somebody in the community that can actually help with that and not think you're crazy when they come to them. Because that's the first thing we hear with everybody that comes and talks to us is you're going to think I'm crazy. No, I won't. Trust me, I won't think you're crazy. And that was one thing that has always brought me a lot of satisfaction with it is just being able to help people. And I think the risk there is I think the reward there is greater than the risk.
So let me ask you this: we talked about like people being haunted, not just places. Is this something that? So does that mean that attachments? Where do you put that? Is that a demon? When people say they have attachments?
I don't believe that attachments. I don't believe that all attachments are demonic. I believe that there are spiritual attachments.
Okay.
Whether that's a spirit that is attached to you for. I mean, there's hundreds of different reasons a spirit can get attached to you. Um, but I don't think all attachments are definitely demonic. There definitely is. There's one thing that you learn about when you study demonology. There's one thing that you really learn about it, and it goes across all cases, even famous cases that are out there. Is you have to open a door, and spiritual attachments you might not necessarily have to open that door. Like I said said earlier with transient spirits can come into a home and want to be there just because they like the atmosphere, they like the energy that you give off, and they can attach to that human or that human energy. Whereas a demonic entity kind of has to have an in into that person.
Okay. Um, just so everyone knows right now, my dumbass didn't put live, so I had to go back and hit live. So we've been talking for a little bit, but you can go back and watch up till now. So we're just now going live on my group page and on YouTube. So sorry about that, people. But yeah, so we're talking about. So what made you say, okay, this is what I want to study? I want. I mean, I know you said you want to help people, but what was that process like to say, it's more than just going after. What I'm saying going after, but studying the paranormal. But you want to study, uh,
Um,
demons, or is it studying demons or
yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, obviously, there's no, obviously, there's no college courses in the study of demonology. So, I
right?
mean, it's something that there's some well-known demonologists out there that I
Yeah,
do take a lot of that I definitely take their advice on. There's classes that I have that I will be going through, and I've gone and looked into. But I mean, obviously, there's no actual course to become a demonologist. A lot of it is a lot of field experience and just having that grounding. The big reason that I kind of got into it is that when I was a kid, I was raised in a Christian home, and so the paranormal in general was kind of just an off subject anyway when I was growing up, because going to a Christian church is, when you pass away, you either go to heaven or hell. There's no in between. But that was one thing that you did believe in as a Christian, and I'm still a Christian. I'm still a professing Christian today. Is that there are demonic entities in the world. Um, and so it kind of tied into what I've already knew about, and it just kind of helped pursue that. And it was just more of that servant's heart of wanting to just to help people and go about it. But the study is, I mean, there's all sorts of material that you can read from good people. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't know what they're talking about. They don't have any actual practical field experience in it, but um, a lot of it is just going out there and actually doing the job and learning how to handle it. I mean, some of the best demonologists out there became demonologists by accident. That's not what they came out to do, but the universe had bigger plans for them, and that's what they
yeah,
ended up becoming. You look at Ed and Lorraine Warren, probably two of the most prolific demonologists in history of the paranormal. They didn't start out becoming demonologists. That's not what they set out to become demonologists, but that's what they became. And a lot of it is just the field experience and being able and going out there and doing those investigations.
Do you think it takes a special kind of person to say this is what I want to do?
I think you have to be very grounded in some sort of belief, because there are demonologists out there that don't have any type of religious backing behind them. But I think you have to definitely be grounded in some sort of belief
Okay.
in order to be an effective demonologist. And I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of the history too. I mean, you can go through, any type of religious scripture that you want and read about it, but there's so much other history beyond that you would have to look into. I mean, you look at Greek mythology. A lot of the Greek mythology, there is a basis in a lot of things that the Greek mythology believed in that interweaves with what we believe is in Christianity or Catholicism. And I think you have to have that grounding, and you have to have your history in check in order to be able to do that. Because though anybody can go and buy paranormal equipment and go out to a cemetery and be an investigator and go out and investigate the paranormal. When it comes to the demonic, you have to. There's a price to pay when you investigate that, because it does take a toll on you yourself, because you do put a target on your back to those entities.
So, is there any special equipment that you use for doing?
I do. We use our standard paranormal equipment: Mel meters, spirit boxes, EVP recorders. The one thing that I do carry with me that isn't paranormal equipment is I have a binder with prayers in it that we carry. I do carry religious metals with me that are blessed. I carry holy water, blessed salt, blessed oil, rosaries, different things like that. And all of it is more on the offensive side of, I have it always in my gear bag with me when we go out on investigations, or if I'm going to a residential haunting, just in case that it is something more. And, walking into a home or walking into an area, you can feel it. You can feel if it's something a little bit more dark in that area. So that's something I do carry with me all the time, is religious metals, religious relics, and things like that with me.
What is the purpose of a demon? What is their reason for being?
If you look at the religious, or if you look at the Christian culture, it's the demons in general are there they're just like God is there to win souls for him. Demons are the exact opposite. I mean, if you look at the concept of God being all good and all good in the world, you have to have an opposite to that. Satan and his demons are the exact opposite. They're all darkness, all evil. And they're trying to lead the world astray. They're trying to lead people astray. And I think that's where that religious backing comes to, is you have to understand the reason as to why they exist, the reason why they are around, why do they interfere in people's lives. And that's one of those things that, when, it's just like when, God tries to win the hearts for him, it's the same thing with demons. They're trying to lead that world. They're trying to lead the people astray. And why there's a reason why they affect some people and not others, that's it's all up to a special circumstance, but they definitely have their reasons and their practices that they do when it comes to each individual person. And they're trying to destroy cultures. They're trying to destroy people, and they do a good job of it. I mean, you can see it in history, and you can see it in the modern culture that we live in now. Demons are very much active in the world, and they do a good job at what they've done. I mean, this is an entity that's been on the earth long before humans were. So you're dealing with an entity that has way more reps in than a human will ever be able to do. So it is a formidable opponent, but that's what they're trying to do, is just destroy you and destroy the world.
Right. So are there really some that are stronger than others, or are they all basically the same?
I have, my thought process on it, and there's a lot of theologians out there that do believe that there is a hierarchy. Just like there's a hierarchy of angelic spirits in the world, there is a hierarchy of demonic entities. And I think they do, from my research and from what I've seen, they do call upon higher ranking demons or more powerful demons if they're needing them to really start messing with people, or really starting to destroy that inner circle, or that family.
Okay. So yeah, that was actually my next question. Like, can a place have multiple demons? Yeah.
Um, they very well can. I mean, one of the big things now that you're looking into, going back to pop culture, the new Conjuring movie came out a few months ago, and it's out on DVD now. And if you look at that case, that if you actually go back and do the research on that case that the Conjuring 3 shows, there was multiple demons in that home.
Mhm.
And there's actual documented proof from the Warrens when they were investigating it that the children that were involved in that said that there were multiple entities in that home. And the original entity that was in there called them by number. He didn't call them by name, he called them by number. And I can't remember off the top of my head how many there were, but there were multiple demonic entities within that home. So I believe that once they gain that foothold in that person's lifestyle, or in that home, to truly gain ground in there, they call upon more.
Okay.
And it's not
Yeah.
to say that one can't do the job, but if they feel the need to, I very much believe that they'll bring in reinforcements when they need to.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is exactly what I was going to say. I was going to that's scary, Walters. That's my buddy that goes out with me bigfooting. Um, so you yourself, have you ever encountered something that was scary? As far as demonic goes.
As far as demonic goes, I would say that's when we were talking earlier, before we started the show. Um, demonic entities, I think, with pop culture and the way that the world is with the paranormal now. I mean, paranormal is so mainstream anymore that every paranormal encounter that somebody has is a demonic entity. I do believe that most demonic entities, or most demonic hauntings, are very rare. I think it's a case that is a very rare occurrence. I would say probably one of the worst ones, and it was before I started actually working as a demonologist for Anubis. We had our shop set up in a historic hotel here in Grand Junction called Hotel Melrose, and Hotel Melrose has a quite an interesting history to it. There was two previous owners that lived there, that ran the hotel. The husband ended up murdering his wife. Where he murdered her, we don't really know. Nobody really knows. Nobody's ever found her body. The only thing that was ever found of her was her skull up in one of the canyons up here, over by Loma. A rancher found her skull in the field over there when he was checking his cattle. And when we started investigating that place, I mean, we caught tremendous evidence in that building when we were there. But there is a darker entity in there. We've caught evidence of that entity being in there. And it started affecting everybody in that building differently. My wife, she started having very, very vivid nightmares of our youngest son. We have a 15-month-old son. Started having very, very vivid dreams of him being caught on a fire in the hotel. And it happened on a very, very regular basis. We had another investigator that was working with us that she started having medical issues, and she actually started vomiting up like a blackish tar on a pretty regular basis. Chris, our executive director, he has had a serious string of medical issues ever since we left Melrose. It went from being a small infection up into his organs shutting down and almost losing him a couple times. So I think that's probably one of the worst cases that I've seen, and unfortunately, we never got to close that case, just due to different circumstances with the hotel. But that was probably one of the worst cases of infestation I've probably seen so far to date, aside from my own personal experiences several years ago.
You kind of made me think about something when you talked about the skull being found out in, what was it, a canyon you said, or?
Yeah, it was actually for the life of me, I'm completely losing track of what it's called. But it was found up in a canyon up on the hillside.
And so I definitely have heard of ghost spirits, paranormal activity happening like in the woods or desert or something like that. What about demonic activity?
Um, I I believe that there are entities out in the woods that are. I wouldn't say that they're demonic entities. I would assume you've probably heard of the term like elemental spirits.
Right, right.
I do believe that some of those that can be very negative. As far as demonic entities, it kind of depends on the land. It kind of depends on what was done out there. I mean, you can have a demonic entity definitely take hold of an area or a property,
Right.
depending on what happened there. And like the Hotel Melrose, what we were talking about earlier, is they had a person that worked there that was actually doing satanic rituals in the basement. And did he bring that spirit in there? He could have. Was there something? Did he bind that spirit to something in that hotel? Very well could have. And I do believe that entities can demonic entities can be in a vacant home, but it has to have a human influence to it. There has to be some ritualistic practices or something like that, because even diehard Satanists, they're intelligent people. They understand that spirit that they're conjuring or that spirit that they're trying to communicate with is a spirit that they can't just let roam, and they do bind it to items. And so if that item is still on that property, or in a
No,
in a pasture or in the woodlands somewhere, it very well could be there.
yeah, because I often wonder if some of what like the cryptid world, whether it's Bigfoot or Dogman or any other
Mhm.
cryptid, if
Yeah,
that gets mistaken, for not just for paranormal activity, but also for demons and
yeah.
uh, you know. Uh, people get stuff thrown at them or hear howls or screams, and you don't know what exactly is throwing this. But I often wonder if it's something not just paranormal, but demonic. You know,
Well, one of the first ones that comes to my mind is the Windigo.
right?
The Windigo. Granted, I've never had any experiences with a Windigo. I don't know anybody that has. But I truly believe that that is a negative spirit, and I do believe that it's more of like an elemental type category for that spirit. But I do believe that spirit is negative in nature. I do believe that it is a negative spirit.
Yeah, and like a big thing in the Bigfoot world is Bigfoot cloaking and jumping through
Yeah,
portals. And I don't think that's what they do. I think they're seeing something else, and that's
yeah,
what you know. I believe Bigfoot's a flesh and blood creature.
I do too. I definitely believe that. I have heard that theory that Bigfoot is interdimensional, that he can travel through dimensions, and that's kind of why that we don't, because that's one big thing. I mean, you've probably heard it hundreds of times when it comes to skeptics is, well, how come we've never found a Bigfoot skeleton?
Right,
How come we've never found a dead Bigfoot? If they exist, how come we've never found one? And that makes people believe that he could be interdimensional, and that's why we don't see things like that. I try to lean more on the biological side of it, because I mean, if you look at a deer carcass in the woods,
right,
if left alone, it's going to decompose very quickly, and
yeah,
it's going to go away very quick. And with other animals,
yeah,
that the traces of that dead animal being there is not going to be there for very long.
right,
And I mean, some of the most remote, hard to get to areas is where the Bigfoot sightings happen. You don't see, very few sightings actually happen right next to a major roadway. I mean, a lot of people are seeing them out in the back country. That is, hard. It's not accessible to a lot of people. And so to say to have that theory that Bigfoot is, well, we never found a dead Bigfoot, so he doesn't exist. Well, that's not true, because some of these places are so inaccessible. By the time you did find it, it's going to be long gone anyway.
One
And so,
example.
what's that?
Well, no, I have to say one example that I always tell people is that a couple of years ago, out in this place called Magnolia, Texas, which is an hour or so outside of Houston. Um, I was over there for a few days, and there was a deer. It just got hit. It was dead on the side of the road, and 3 days he was skin and bones just because of the vulture. It was literally skin and bones just because of the vultures. Um, so in the woods, you know, nature cleans up after itself. You know, other animals are going to come, bacteria, worms, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to clean it up pretty quick. And I can't remember what show it was, but they were talking to a park ranger asking him about coming upon dead bears. He had been in the ranger service for like 25 years. He said he only found one bear that had ever died.
Yeah.
You know, and there's probably way less Bigfoot than there are bear. You know, I don't think that there are the tens of thousands that people think. I think they're probably in the lower 10,000s.
No, and I mean, you know it as well as I do. I mean, skeptics are skeptics for a reason, and they're going to find any way to try to debunk what you find. And like you said before, I do truly believe, we deal with cryptids and UFO sightings as well as the paranormal with Anubis, and I do 100% believe that Bigfoot is a biological. He's a biological animal. He's not. I don't believe he's a spirit. I believe that he is an animal that's out there. But skeptics are going to be skeptics. They're going to try to disprove anything that you find. I mean, even if it's the best evidence, I could show a video of an apparition to somebody and say, here's the proof that apparitions exist. And they're going to say it's faked. Or they're going to say, this is photoshopped, because that's just, that's the way I was before I got into paranormal. Any paranormal show out there, it's fake. It's not real. It's fake. Or any paranormal evidence I would see, it's fake. That's not true. But skeptics are going to be who they are, and like I said, I do agree with you on there that I do believe Bigfoot is a legitimate animal that's out there. And I mean, there's a lot of proof behind it too. I mean, there's multiple people out there that have had lots of sightings of Bigfoot, and I do believe that he is out there.
So what do you have coming up for yourself? I mean, do you have any events coming up, or research investigations, or?
Right now we're working on one right now in Silt, Colorado. We have a residential home that we're going to be doing, that I'm going to be looking at there. We also have a museum in Montrose that we're looking at to get into. It's called Museum of the Mountain West. We're looking at getting in there. And if people that watch paranormal TV shows, Ghost Adventures was out there several years ago. And so we're going to try to get out there and do that one too. We went out there and did my wife and I went out there and scouted it a couple weeks ago. And so we're going to try to get out there and do some things. And that's got a lot of interesting history, there's a lot of things out there that a lot of buildings that were brought in from different areas that were rebuilt in the location. So there's a lot of history there. So we're going to try to get out there and do some stuff.
Do you have a favorite spot you like going to?
Honestly, if I'm just going to go out and do just an investigation, just to get out and do some stuff, the cemetery that we go out to in Grand Junction is by hands down my favorite spot. Just because it's a highly, highly active area. I mean, we have never gone out there and not caught something. And it's a great area. It's a great training area. We've done trainings out there with other investigators. We're looking at running some camps out there. One thing that we're looking at this next summer when school gets out again is doing a youth camp with kids. One thing that I try to instill in people is, even with my own kids, my kids have ghost hunted with me for a long time. I mean, they were probably the very first investigation. One of the very first investigations I ever did with actual equipment was with my kids. And we went out and investigated, and I try to instill in people that, the paranormal is a scary thing. It's a scary thing to a lot of people, especially if you watch, television or movies. It can be a very scary thing. But try to turn that fear into curiosity and get out there and explore it. And you soon find out that it's not as scary as TV and movies make it out to be. And that's one thing that, in the younger generation, especially with the paranormal being very mainstream, is teaching the younger audiences that, paranormal isn't all about demons. It isn't all about scary things. It's an actual, there's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of, there's a lot of things that you can do in the paranormal field that you can gather a lot of evidence with it and make it not so scary and make it not so intimidating to that younger audience.
Yeah, and there's certainly a lot of worse ways to spend your time, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I would definitely agree to that. And I mean, it's one of those things. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people out there. I would bet that there's a lot of people in just the town that I live in that have paranormal experiences on the daily basis, but they don't say anything about it because they're going to think people are going to think they're crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And once you kind of bring it out into the open and say, look, it's not crazy. What you're experiencing is not crazy. It's not something that is so far fetched that it's out of the realm of possibility, and making it more understandable to people and making people understand that it's not a bad thing, and you're not going nuts by experiencing this. It happens all the time. And teaching younger generations and teaching kids like that, there could be very kids out there that have an interest in learning about it because they're having experiences at home and they want to understand, and that's something that I would have liked when I was a kid, when I had some of my experiences, is being able to have a group that I can say, hey, I've had this experience before, can you teach me what I need to do, or how can I handle this, how can I cope with it?
Have you ever had like any friends or families or coworkers, for that matter, come up to you and ask you or maybe tell you their experiences?
Oh yeah, one of them in particular, it was actually when I was working security. There's a stretch of highway that we used to run quite a bit, and one night I was driving through there, and it was about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm fully awake. I'm actually listening to a podcast when I'm driving down the road, and we're driving down the road, and I see a mist coming across the highway, and I see this mist. I'm like, oh, that's weird. It's the middle of summertime. I don't know why there'd be a mist out here or a fog coming out here. And then I started looking at it, and it actually looked like it was walking across the road. It actually had legs walking across the road. And I said, oh man, it's a person. So I hit the brakes and never saw it again. Well, then several weeks later, the guy that had actually, he's a good friend of mine. Uh, he worked on my days off. He was my relief on that job. And we had just gotten on the topic of it. And he's like, oh yeah, the ghost on 70. And I kind of looked at him. I said, wait a minute. I said, what ghost on 70? I said, where's it at? And the exact spot that I saw it. He's like, yeah. He's like, I saw it 2 nights ago. He's like, it looks like a fog and it walks across the road. I said, yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Now I've had other jobs that I've worked at. I've worked for, the government for quite a while, and I've had government people, government employees that I've worked with, find out that I investigate, and, oh, I got to tell you about this experience that I've had, or what do you think about this? Or, I've had knocks in my house, or I hear footsteps in my house. Do you think it's a demon? Well, let's look into it. Let's talk about it. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there was a time when I didn't necessarily keep quiet about it, but I didn't broadcast it out
Yeah.
either. You know, but after a while, word just gets out, and so I always think it's pretty funny or pretty cool when people call me or text me or what message me or and say, hey man, this happened to me when I was hunting, or this happened to me in my house, or whatever. So I like being the guy they come to. It's pretty cool. It's pretty
And that's
cool.
one reason that I really got into it. And that's one, I have a real calling to residential homes or businesses.
Mhm.
I've never been big into the major haunted locations. I mean, there are some major haunted locations that I would love to visit. Um, but there's I really have a, a deep love for residential homes. And that's for the same reason. I want to help people that necessarily can't help themselves in that matter. And that's one thing. I have a very big love for the residential homes and the investigations that are kind of off the beaten path a little bit.
Right.
And that's one thing that I really like, because we do get messages quite a bit from people that our executive director, he fields calls quite a bit for Colorado. Somebody will call him, hey, I'm having this happen in my house, and he'll send it over to me, and I'll call the person, we'll talk to him. And just having that sympathetic ear a lot of times really helps people out a lot. And uh, whether it's paranormal, whether it's not, I mean, there's a lot of times that what they think is paranormal isn't paranormal. And I think a lot of investigations that we've looked into, or a lot of preliminary investigations that we've done, it turns out that it's not paranormal. It's something else. And but just giving people a peace of mind that whether it's paranormal or not, we're going to help you out with it, and we'll figure out, we'll get to the bottom of it. We'll help you out.
So you talked about you have some places you want to go. Do you have a bucket list?
I do. I have a bucket list. Probably the biggest one that I want to go to right now is Gettysburg.
Gettysburg. Yeah, but I'd love to go to that one.
Gettysburg is one just because of the. I mean, it's a sad story. I mean, Gettysburg is one of the worst battles of the Civil War. I mean, there was a tremendous loss of life there within a course of a few days, but the paranormal activity out there is just unreal. I mean, full body apparitions,
Yeah,
residual haunts, intelligent hauntings. I mean, it's just you have everything all in one spot, and it's an absolutely crazy place to go to.
yeah. That's definitely one of mine. But we're already up here on our hour. Is there anything you want to tell people, man? Especially people who might be, holding back from telling people what they experienced, and or people who might want some help but they don't know how to do it. How would what would you tell them?
I would say, I mean, the biggest thing is, don't be afraid to tell people. I mean, if you live in Colorado, definitely get in touch with us, Anubis Paranormal Research Organization. If you type us into Google search, we're the very first website that shows up. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. Um, Look me up on Facebook. Send me a message. And I mean, even if you don't live in Colorado, I mean, we can definitely try to help you out as much as we can. Anubis Paranormal, we're all over the country. We have locations all over the country. We're soon to go global. We have a chapter that's probably going to be starting up here pretty soon in the UK, and we have a couple others overseas that are going to be starting up as well. So we're soon to be a global organization here pretty soon.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. And man, you feel free to post whatever you want to post in the group. Let people know what you're doing. I'm sure people would love to hear about it.
Absolutely, and definitely don't. I mean, if anybody's out there, definitely don't think you're crazy. I mean, it does happen to a lot of people. Everybody has paranormal experiences, so you're not crazy by thinking it. And just if you feel like it's something that you need to get help with, or you need somebody to talk you through it, reach out to us or reach out to a reputable paranormal team that's in your area. Definitely look for somebody that has a reputation of doing sound investigations. Don't look for the fly by night teams out there.
Yeah, and stay away from the people with the drama. You don't want
Yes, absolutely. If
yeah.
if a, par- if a paranormal comes in, if a paranormal team comes in, and the first thing they pull out is a Ouija board, I would definitely try to find a different team.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a whole other topic too. We probably should come back and talk to you about too, man.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We
Yeah.
can definitely talk about that. I have quite a bit of experience with those, so we can definitely talk about that.
Well, cool. And your team is what under on Facebook?
We're Anubis Paranormal Research Organization. We have several different chapters, so just type in Anubis Paranormal Research Organization, and you'll find all of us there.
Cool beans, man. Well, like I said, I started the broadcast late. I looked up and I saw it was just on record only. So, but after this, I'll go back and I'll share it with everyone and let everybody know what happened. But everyone, good night, and we will see you Thursday night.
All right, sounds good.
All right, hold on real quick, buddy.